exercise and greenery was a very important part of your treatment. So they would lift the spirits in various ways. There was even a brass band, patient brass band during the early days. And occupation was a very important part, so you would have had a job to do. If you were able, if you were well enough, you would have been given a job. And regular meals obviously were important, and somewhere to sleep. So I'll show you the beds later, but here is where they used to be. This is St. Peter's Hospital. And it's a rather beautiful building that was bombed in the Second World War, so we don't have it anymore. But it wasn't very suitable for anybody that was ill, physically or mentally ill. It was the workhouse, and the workhouse was a place where you weren't, they tried to discourage you from staying. And they tried to make you work as well, hence the word workhouse. Before the asylum, people were often seen as being beset by the devil and or being punished by God, and actually having agency to make people better was quite a radical thought in the Victorian times, and there was quite a lot of debate about it, which is quite interesting for us, because they felt, some people felt, if God had punished you, who were we to interfere and try and allay that punishment you had to suffer? So that's quite an interesting thought to hold on to, because subsequently these big asylum hospitals have come under quite a lot of media and fictional attention, and you know, they morphed into something else during the 30s and the 70s. They weren't quite the same well-being orientated setup. So it's quite an interesting thought. I think I can just take you out to the foyer. So this would be our entrance. And here's another little item of well-being. So we've got an asylum decorator and asylum specialist on what a building should look like. And one of the things he stipulated and encouraged asylum creators to do was not to give you a white ceiling. He felt white ceilings were not particularly good for your health, but blue ceilings, any shade of blue, with gold stars if you could afford it. So we've chosen to paint our foyer, and just to give you a little view. So the actual museum itself is run by and developed by volunteers. So everything you see here, all the displays, have all been done by people like yourself contributing. And we've had a fair few artists in residence over the time who've taken inspiration, not just from some of the sort of artifacts, but from the whole story, and considering the whole story. I'm going to take you over here to have a little look. We've got the Bristol Archives have lots of beautiful pictures of some of the patients that were here in the early days, and we've had somebody research all 5,100 patients from 1861 to 1900, and he's put them on a database for us. So we now know what happened to these people, why they were here. For instance, this person here, I don't know if, can you see Harriet, Kate?
Yes, is she the one in the middle there?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah.
she actually, everybody, one of the things that Paul found out was that everybody here was ill. Not necessarily what we would consider a mental illness now. For instance, 1/5 of the patients were epileptic, but in those days, anything that presented itself as something to do with the brain was considered a mental illness. So people with learning disabilities or brain damage, or in this case, Harriet has got a very nasty skin disease, which is extremely rare. People get it, but in the Victorian times, if you got it, it slowly got worse. It was incurable, and you eventually died because it started to eat your organs. And she was probably in the last stage of the skin disease, and because she was only here for 7 weeks. So her behavior possibly had got too much for whoever was looking after her to cope with. And she probably was in a huge amount of pain. And when the disease started to affect her brain, she ended up coming here. Apparently, you can still catch it today, but you'll be pleased to know antibiotics stop it in its tracks. So we've got all sorts of people that came and went. About 48% of the patients left cured or relieved. 70% of those within the first year, which is interesting. And what else can I tell you about it? They weren't very knowledgeable about what people had. So when the medical superintendent changed, the doctors would have their own particular, what do you say? Gosh, I've lost the word. Their own particular idea of what people, so your diagnosis could change literally overnight when the medical superintendent changed. We've also got this rather beautiful timeline, which sort of shows you the evolution of the mental health treatment. So the red line here is about our hospital, the Bristol Hospital, and Bristol mental health treatment, and then general mental health, and then mental health treatment. And one of the interesting things, so here's the act I was talking about in 1845, where every county was told they had to have an asylum. And that's why we had so many of these big old hospital buildings, was because and Bristol was a bit slow because ours didn't open until 1861. They kept pretending that the workhouse was suitable because they'd rebranded it asylum to try and placate the inspectors who used to come and pronounce, the lunacy commissioners pronounced St. Peter's totally unfit for patients many times, not just in 1844. Here's the brass band. That's 1869, they purchased the instruments for the band. If you start to look at the sort of timeline, you'll see that in the early days, we've got Freud, we've got behaviorism in 1901, we've got Jung, we've got analyzing dreams. It's all quite what we would now call well-being and looking after yourself with the 5, I can't remember what it's called, 5 somethings that we're all meant to do: eat well, sleep well, exercise well, find some nice thing to focus on, etc. So, and then as we move on, it's the 1930s that actually some of these more invasive, surgical, aggressive treatments started to come in. I think people started to, it was the period of eugenics as well, so experimentation on people started to be quite, it wasn't just Germany, it was across Europe that people were less kind about people that they considered less able. And so there was a lot of experimentation about trying to get people better quickly. So we have lobotomies, ECTs, convulsive therapies, and they're all born in the 1930s. And the guy that invented lobotomy got a Nobel Prize. So, you know, it was all considered very avant-garde and the future. And then, of course, we had the birth of the NHS in 1948. And although we all appreciate the NHS, actually, the NHS wasn't really set up to look after people long term. The idea was that you go into hospital, you get better, you go out again. And they took over 100 mental asylums around the country when they weren't really prepared. So one of the things that quickly went was the idea of occupation as a treatment, you know, giving people something to do to help them focus became much more difficult once the asylums were closed. And also they used to be employed within the hospital, and that went. So in Bristol, our consultant psychiatrist invented something called industrial therapy, and he got the businesses around Bristol to employ his patients and supported them getting better that way. And it was so successful, it was replicated across the country. And that sort of program sort of faded out when all the asylums shut in the 1990s. And so we move on to the 1960s to now, and we're starting to look at other options again. Sort of the behaviorism is coming back, the idea of looking at how we can support people, and also the new generations of drugs are much more finely tuned to actual people's needs. And still a long way to go, I would say, but here we go. And the actual hospital on this site then shut in 1994, but we've still got a couple of units still on site, one for young people and one for the medium secure people who are very ill and might have a criminal history that's unmanageable else in the care service. So it's just quite interesting when you see how treatment has changed and how it's developed, and how people. So here we've got lots of artifacts about the administration. There's some really curious ones and lovely ones to look at. We've got a really beautiful ball, Bristol Lunatic Asylum ball with a little pen. There's some tokens from the occupations in the 1920s. Tokens were introduced to pay the patients so they could have a choice in the shop, in the hospital, rather than just be given cigarettes or sweets by the staff. There's a nice key there. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it, Kate?
Yep, we can see the key, yep.
Oh, lovely. So that key was made by a patient, and apparently, according to the story behind it, it used to open the telephone box so he could make phone calls, but it also opened the key to the female side of the hospital. I don't know whether that was true or not. So he could, you know, trolley into the bit he wasn't allowed to go to. The hospital was divided in two, male one side, male the other. We've got you know, it's a normal huge building, so there's all the things that you need to set in place. So there's the fires, the administration, and then this is some of the boardroom furniture and some of the paneling from the boardroom. We've got a little mock-up here. It's all looking a bit dusty and tired, I'm afraid, because we haven't had people in to do anything. We've got some nice maps showing where everything was at various times. And this is quite interesting. We don't often think about depicting mental illness. And this poster we were sent by somebody that came and did an internship in the 1970s and then went back to India to work. And one of the things he realized was that the mental health nurses didn't really read and write sufficiently. So these would have all gone out to the village medical unit to support the nurses to understand that what mental disorders are curable, and these are some of the features. So this is all rather really interesting. And when I first came to the museum, I couldn't work out why we had this poster up or where it had come from. And then lo and behold, a year later, the man who had devised it walked through the door. So he was able to tell me that the reasoning behind it and the process that they had gone through to get these pictures right, and whether the people that were going to look at them would understand what they meant. So that's for the artists amongst us, it's quite interesting. I'll show you my favourite artefact now, which is a really rather beautiful 1970s slide. And if you press a button, it lights up. So this was pre-computers, electronic stuff. This was the latest in teaching materials for teaching nurses. So we've been teaching nurses on this site since the 1880s. And the University of the West of England still teaches nurses on the site. And then we've got some really beautiful old-fashioned, we've got books with some of these illustrations in as well. These were all part of your training if you were going to become a nurse. And we've got some nice, here's a rather nice, she looks very 1930s. You know, and here's all the mouths to swap the mouths for your training on resuscitation. We've got some nice sculptures of veins and arteries, and one of these very nice, you know, illustrations of what goes on inside us. Some nurses, and we've got quite, there's some of the volunteers are very fond of these mannequins, and some of them are very not fond of them. So we've popped them in this room with the uniforms on for good measure. This baby is rather sweet. Nowadays they have very expensive rubber babies for the nurses to hold and to understand what a baby might look like at any stage of its development. But this is an early version of that. She's got a porcelain head and sand-filled body, and she is exactly the right weight for her size that a baby would be. So she's quite heavy, so she gives you that sensation. This is another beautiful bit of patient art. The men would work, many of the men would get jobs in the workshops. And this is a piece of work done by one of the patients in the wood workshop. So it's carved from a single piece of wood. So how am I doing for time? I'm chatting away.
No, fine. You're doing fine for time. It's really interesting.
Good.
Yeah.
So this is another whole, everywhere you look, there's a story. There's just so many things to think about. And here we have, of course, the development of drugs, the pharmacy. I mean, people didn't used to have drugs in packets, in plastic and pills form. They would have had them in bottles, in liquid form. And we've got a lovely array of the different eras of pills all in this cupboard. And of course, the pharmacist would have done a lot of grinding and putting things together themselves. And we would have had one on site, so your medicine would have been made on site. Here we have another really lovely piece of textiles. This is an early Victorian straitjacket. It's made out of very strong blanket, if you can see it, but it's been reinforced with the sewing, so it's got this like crazy stitching all over it to reinforce and give it extra strength. And then we've got these beautiful buttons with the name of the asylum inside on it. And then these very long arms. So the straitjacket would have been, this is the back of the straitjacket, and the arms would have gone round the front, and it would have made the patient hug themselves, which would have stopped them wanting to move, and so potentially would have worked with your brain and body chemistry to stop your flight and fight mode. The later ones, this is a later one, it's a 1930s one, is less kind and less thought, you know, less well devised, really. We've got a little side room that somebody's put together to show you the size of the side room. And those would have been used for people that were ill and or had, you know, were working really hard and had been doing an amazing job. And one of the patients who worked in the hairdressers was given a side room as a thank you for all the hard work she put into the hairdressers. Though if you listen to the oral history, and that's another thing, we do have a huge wealth of oral histories. The hairdresser who worked with Janet in the salon does describe their relationship, and it was quite fraught in that Janet wasn't always amenable and did like to break things. Here we've got some of the stuff from the kitchen, and of course food is a huge story around well-being and getting people well again. As an early 1861 diet, so the breakfast for boys was coffee, bread and butter, and the dinner was cooked meat without bone, the veg with half a pint of beer, and then tea, bread and butter. And I think the women got slightly less ounces of cooked meat, but they got the same amount of beer, which is, and I think if you were working, you got an extra, so the laundry got an extra half pint of tea as a thank you for working. So working patients got extra food as their payment, I suppose. Here we've got some lovely pictures of what the asylum looked like. So that's with the tablecloths on. Here we've got some 1970s art therapy going on. Everybody's in their coats, so I don't think it was very warm in where. Oh, it was temporarily in this church. No, it's definitely not warm, because the church is never very warm here. And then we have more dining spaces in different wards. So each ward was built to be like a house. So it would have had a bedroom. Here's a bedroom. And it would have had a dining room and a living space. Here's a corridor bedroom. This is when it was overcrowded. The corridors got turned into dormitories. So it's an example of more examples of the bedrooms. And we've got things like the locker. So here the patients have got lockers, but as one of the nurses said, you know, they're called lockers, but they didn't have keys. So that's why so many patients were seen wandering around with bags, because if you wanted to keep your things safe and not touched by other people, there wasn't anywhere to put things that was safe. And of course, it's the same in hospital now. You get a little locker, but if you're only in hospital for a short space of time, it doesn't matter. But if you're in hospital for many years, it starts to matter. So here we've got some of the artifacts to do with care. We've got lots of very beautiful drawings by a patient who was here in the 1950s, who was an artist. And this one's really lovely. It's called Charlie, and he's got his nice red dressing gown on. The bathing rules were very strict. We've got several sets of those which are really interesting. Boots, lockable boots. I thought lockable boots when I first came meant that they were locked to your ankles so you couldn't move, but that was completely wrong. They're not locked together, they're locked actually to your ankles so that you can move, but you can't get rid of your shoes. And in Victorian times, so many of the patients would not have been used to wearing shoes, but they were given shoes to wear if they were working outdoors. But then because they weren't used to shoes, they would kick the shoes off, and shoes were very expensive. So to make sure they didn't lose their shoes, or they would be locked to your ankles. So it wasn't, the full story isn't quite as unkind or controlling as one might think. It was more, it was, you know, as everything does, money rules the roost. And certainly we're in a world where money rules, I think. Here we are, we've got these rather lovely suicide watch webbed fork and a knife with only a tiny bit of edge. And that was so that if you were sitting around the table, you didn't look different to anyone else, and you weren't forced to eat with a spoon or with your fingers. So you had the same cutlery, and it matches the design matches the cutlery that people would have used at the time. And those strange cups back there are early versions of drinking cups for when you're in bed. We now have those plastic ones, but this is early designs that were used. And this is one of my favorite displays. I don't know why, but it's just all the different shapes and sizes of the bedpans, which kind of reminds you that people were ill. They weren't all just mentally ill. They often had other illnesses and needed other kinds of long-term care. Here's the padded cell. It's not the right size. It would have been big enough for a bed. And we didn't have very many of them at this hospital, but they were put in place if somebody was prone to fitting. Because there was really enough nurses per patient, it stopped somebody having to be monitored 24 hours. So they would, if they were prone to fitting at night, they would be safe from damaging their head. The early Victorian panel is the cream one, and you can see there evidence of all the different colours that the rooms would have been painted, that they didn't go for this 1930s grey, which is the door is an original panel from the 1930s. It was a real contrast to all the different colours that this panel has been painted over the years. It's got pink in it, it's got green in it, as well as the overall cream. Are you still with me, everyone?
We're still here. Yep.
Oh, good. This is some of the window in the
Sorry, the internet connection's a little bit jumpy now.
Windows are beautiful. There's beautiful stuff. Oh, move back this way.
That might have been a little bit too far out of the. There we go. That's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that window there is from the main building, and in the dining room you can still see these beautiful stained glass windows. They're ginormous. The dining room looks like a church in itself. It's so huge, and it's got these beautiful windows and beautiful cornicing, and the university has recently restored it really nicely. I have to say, in grey though. Grey's our new favourite colour. I'm going to, the next bit, I am going to slightly be going out of range, but I just wanted to show you some more Dennis Reed pictures I'm going to see if I can get away with it. Give me a shout if I'm not getting away with it.
Okay.
So here's Dennis. This is a self-portrait. We don't have in our collection, but one of our volunteers bought online, watching Dennis, about 3-4 years ago. And she did the most amazing piece of research, finding out about his life and who he was. She went, reading books, because he was at the Royal College of Art with some famous artists, and they've mentioned him. But we were very lucky in that he was here for 3 years, and during his stay here, he was encouraged to draw by the consultant psychiatrist. So this is a rather lovely picture of nurses, a patient there with her little bag, people walking, exercising. I really love the way it does this whirl, and then we've got this little man here looking really despondent, and the nurse doing her stockings and smoking. And he wouldn't have seen very many female patients because he was in the male ward, so that's a bit of a shame. So most of our pictures are of the men. Here's another picture of men walking in the exercise yard, another one walking. Lovely use of colour there. And there's a nurse helping somebody back indoors. This is one of my favourite. It's the bathing, little bottom there. And here's the attendant looking very bored while somebody has their hair wash. Another attendant sorting out something there. And these were the rather beautiful Victorian window design that were taken out in the 1970s and replaced. Here we've got people out on the veranda waiting for tea. This is one of my favourites as well, because you can almost feel this man breathing. So that just sitting around. So this was the 1950s when the National Health Service had taken over. So these men would have had jobs to do in a previous decade, but because of the NHS, that wasn't quite in place yet, and Dr. Early's industrial therapy hadn't quite reached its zenith. This is another nice touch with the little red bit on the socks and the board and the little rose on his bedside table. This is another nice picture. People just sitting, thinking, contemplating. Going there, and then here they are shaving. And even just the shaving has a decade by decade story. So I've got an oral history of a nurse who was here in the 1970s, and his job was to train the ward of patients, there were 8 of them, to shave, because they'd ceased to be able to shave themselves because of health and safety. So they were being shaved by the nurse, and this new radical ward sister who came when he was working there said, right, let's give people more control over their lives, let's get them deinstitutionalized, let's get them shaving again. So in the 1970s they were having to learn to shave, but as you see in the 1950s they were, apart from this chap here, being shaved, they were shaving themselves. So that's quite interesting. There's quite a lot of stories of where people were allowed to do things like in the laundry or the sewing room, and then somebody would come along and say, oh, that's too dangerous, they're not allowed to do that. And then 5 years later, they were doing it again. We've got loads of syringes and stories like that. This is some of the First World War to boil up things. Here's some of the equipment for ECT and lobotomy. And then I'm still moving into quaky areas now. Another little setup at the pharmacy. One of our volunteers has given us a story about her experience of drugs. She got a schizoaffective disorder in 1992, age 17. And so over the past 25 years, she's slowly been getting better, mostly. And she talks about the drugs and how these drugs have supported her to lead a normal life, to have a job, to be married. And although she has from time to time tried to adjust the medication and have less of it, she becomes quickly unwell again. So she's lent us all her pills. Not lent us, given us all the pills that she didn't actually need anymore to tell that story. And she's one of our regular volunteers. Then we've got something about insulin therapy, which is quite interesting, another invasive treatment. And this is the area where I can't really take you down, but our lobotomy and our electroconvulsive therapy and all our ECT stories down that end. And then there's lots of, we've got some good oral histories about both of those from people talking about how it was used now and in the 90s, not the lobotomy, ECT, and conversations about lobotomy. Because in Bristol we had the Burden Neurological Institute, which was set up to support brain chemistry and look at brain chemistry by Rosa Burden. She set it up in the 1930s, I think, and it goes on today. It's now based at, I think it's based at Southmead Hospital now, but it's one of the first research units set up to look at neurological conditions. So we actually had quite a lot of patients going to the Burden Institute for treatment in the 70s and 80s that we've got stories about. Now I'm really moving out of time, out of range. Are you still with me, Kate?
Yeah, we're okay at the moment. Seems to be okay at the moment.
Okay, so this is the very end. As you can see, the exit. We've got something about the industrial therapy here, and we've also got a little bit about the laundry in the sewing room here, and here's the hairdressing display with all her bits and bobs and some of the story that she tells. That's her there with a nice hairstyle. And this is a little bit about the living space and the importance of smoking. For patients, it was very much a currency. It was a treat. And that's a typical day room. There would have been the men had snooker tables, billiard tables. I don't know what the women had. And here's some of the old irons and some of the sewing stuff and laundry stuff here. And some of,
I think, Stella, it might have switched to just audio now. The video is frozen. We might
use on site. Okay, no problem.
That's okay. We might have just gone.
I had gone into an area I knew I couldn't get away with.
We got away with it for a little bit.
Am I back yet?
Yes, you're coming back now. Yeah.
We did. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Good, good. Anyway, that is really, I mean, really happy to answer questions if anybody's got any.
Yeah, should we do that now? So I forgot to mention at the beginning that we probably won't fill the whole 2 hours, but we wanted to make sure that everybody had enough time to ask any questions they might have. So I'm just going to pop it back on gallery view so I can see everybody. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? You can ask them here or write them in the chat if you would prefer. So Sambika has just asked, Stella, do you have archives at the museum as well?
We do have a library up the far end, which has quite a lot of really interesting material in it. But the actual archives from the hospital are at Bristol Archives. So they are, you know, accessible, you know, when they're open, which they're not at the moment, nor are we. Yeah.
And do you have, Stella, is there access to stuff online as well, like images from the collection or anything like that?
We've got everything. We've got quite a big, we've got quite an extensive Facebook page. If you wanted, you were interested, you know, keep trolling down. We've had a lovely volunteer. He's been doing an object of the month for over 2 years now. So every month he does an object and a thing. So there's quite a lot of material on Facebook. Then of course there's our web page and the blog page on the web page, which has got lots of articles by Paul Tobiah, who did the research into the Victorian patients. And he's always available for further information. And then we have a little bit of an Instagram page, but not much. And that's it really, online.
So can I just have a question, another one?
Yeah, sure.
So thank you so much, Stella. That was really amazing, going around and looking at the museum. It's so packed with so much information. It looks like most of the objects and paintings and stuff are probably, is this correct, in the museum?
Yeah.
And there are some, obviously archives like other objects and other artworks at the Bristol Archive store?
No, the archive, Bristol Archive mostly has just the paper records.
Oh, okay.
Which is, and the photographs of the patients, which is where Paul Tobiah did all his research.
Okay, thank you.
Which is why we're really lucky. I mean, he must have spent 3 years, you know, of at least 2 mornings a week just going through 5,100 records, which is, so we're really privileged that somebody's done that extensive piece of work, which is why we can be so confident that the Victorian treatment, they had no drugs, so they were just using well-being to help people get better, because the drugs didn't exist. And so we've been able to look at the patient records, and he, because he was a mental health nurse, he was able to confirm the diagnosis really. Yes, this person definitely has something I recognize. It could be this or that, you know, which is really interesting.
Very interesting.
Any other questions from anybody? One of the things we had as a question in a session the other day is about, that I thought it would also be good to mention, is that even though this course is online, we have got a budget for this project that includes travel to the museum when we're able to do that. So that won't be during the course, but it could be that you can go individually or arrange a time that's suitable for you to go as a group once it's a bit safer. So we do really want you to be able to see the museum in person as well at some point. So just so you know, that opportunity is there as well. Any more questions?
I suppose one of the other things was if people would like to, if people choose something to focus on and think, oh, I wouldn't mind, they can just ask and see if we've got images. I mean, I've got hard drives full of things, you know, including the audio. and some of the objects, not all of them. So it's always worth asking and saying, oh, have you got? I know it's not the same as being here and touching and you know, but it's the best we can do in the circumstances.
I've just put in the chat the contact details if you'd like to book an artist support slot on Monday or Tuesday. So that would be just to email my colleague Hannah Whitlock, and her email address is in the chat. I've also popped the link in the chat as well, which is for more information, and that's where you would also download an application form. And then finally, my contact details, email address and mobile. If you have any questions after today, or if you would like to apply in a different format, please do get in touch with me. But yes, if there are no other questions, give everyone a moment. Doesn't look like it. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you so much, Stella, for giving us that tour. There's so much stuff and so much interesting stuff, and
everything's got a story to it. It's quite compelling.
Yes, it's amazing. I feel really privileged having gone around with you, and yeah, your enthusiasm is contagious. I love all your I just love seeing that.
Thank you.
And experiencing it. It feels like a sort of personal tour. It's kind of better than going in on my own.
Great. Well, thank you everybody, and thanks also to the BSL interpreters for their help today. And yes, hopefully you will apply, and we'll hopefully see you on the course.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.